Good evening, Monday Morning Quarterback, episode 31. Thanks for tuning in. We're out here at our race shop. Tonight we're going to go over how to properly set the gas pressure in your shocks, why we take the steps we do, and just make sure you're totally clear on how to do that, because if you're not setting it correctly, you could get a false reading, and we certainly don't want that to happen. So just got back from Eldora, where we were over there for the 4 Crown. We had quarter midgets going on during the day, and then wing sprint cars the first night, and all the USAC divisions the second night. So great weekend for us over there. On the quarter midget side, Ty Driscoll picked up a win. Jacob Denny and Preston Latimus all got national event wins over there. And then Tyler Courtney won the midget and silver crown portion of the 4 Crown with our shocks. So that was a great weekend. Other big races going on out west, the Mark Hagopian Memorial, and Frank Flood won the first night out there in the driven house car, which is really cool since they put that race on. And then the final night, Jake Andriotti picked up the Super 600 win, Corey Day won the restricted class, and Austin Wood won junior sprints, all on CSA shocks. So good weekend for our micro sprint customers on the West Coast. So we'll jump right in. I'll go over my steps to doing this, and then I'll answer your questions after I'm done. So we have a RS-17 monotube shock mounted up on Braden Fox's wing sprint car here. And what I do is I will unhook the shock from one end. And the reason I do that is if we were to check the gas pressure here, it's going to have a slightly higher reading than if we fully extend it. And the reason is, as we fully extend this shock, the divider piston is going to go down to what we call the home position. So you'll be checking the pressure of the full gas chamber. Okay, so as we extend it till it tops out, now that divider piston is all the way down. As we compress the shock and the shaft goes in, the divider piston moves up into the bore, making the chamber smaller, and it'll give you a higher pressure rate. And I'll show you that when we hook the gas gauge up. So that is called gas pressure gain as we go through displacement. And one of the reasons, that we run the larger bulb is so we don't have as much gas pressure gain through displacement, which really helps in a slick track application. So with the shock fully extended, we want to make sure the T-handle's backed all the way out on the gauge. We'll screw the gauge on. Now you shouldn't need any wrenches for this. You just screw the gauge on until it stops and the copper crush washer seals. If you start using a wrench, you're going to wear out that copper crush washer, and then we'll have to replace this inflation tool part. So one nice thing about our inflation gauges is they're fully rebuildable. If you need a new gauge, we can just replace the gauge. If you need a new T-handle portion, we can replace that as well. So once we're on and tight, we will screw the T-handle in to depress the Schrader valve and get a reading. So as you can see, we're just shy of 40 pounds, fully extended. As I compress the shock, you see the needle going up. So if we were to check it on the car, it's going to give us a slightly different reading. So we'll pull this back out, and you'll see that gauge going back to that 40 range. All right. I got my air tank filled with nitrogen, and so we will just give it a little shot and then just let the air out to get to, say we want to run this at 60. We'll run it just a hair over 60, so when we take this off, the few pounds we lose, we have 60 in there. Back that the T-handle off, get this tool off, and it's ready to go back on the car. So it's a pretty simple process. We get a lot of guys that are converting to gas shocks, and they're nervous about that. They're nervous about the time it's going to take, having to lug around a nitrogen bottle, an inflation tool, all that. Not that big of a deal. You can do your whole car, probably 5 minutes when you get to the track. I recommend doing it when you get to the track. One of the first things you do when you unload, unhook the shock, set your pressure. I was always a fan of just filling one air tank with nitrogen and leaving that, and then you don't have to lug around a big nitrogen bottle at the track. You can just go from corner to corner with this pretty easy. So that's how we set the gas pressure. That's why we always set it fully extended, so we're checking it at a constant position every time, and something pretty simple to do. So I'll take the camera from my cameraman and answer questions. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I will be happy to answer any questions you have based on, you can see my helpers back there in the back. We've been cleaning the shop up. We're getting the floors recoated this week. So anybody that's tuned in and has questions, we're here to answer those for you. This week we're headed to Kokomo on Thursday for the final night of the SmackDown. And then Gas City USAC show Friday. Hello Rick, thanks for tuning in. And then I think I'm going to take Hudson BMX Racing on Saturday, take Saturday off, and start moving stuff back in the shop here after they get those floors coated. So nobody tuned in has any questions on setting gas pressure or anything else they've encountered throughout the week of racing or the season for that matter. We're here to help answer those questions. Another thing I'd like to see you guys comment on is some other topics you'd like to see us go over. So we do these shows for you guys, and so we want to give you the information that you're wanting to see. So if there's a specific topic you would like to see us cover at any point, just let us know. Paul, any value in running the shocks upside down? You know, it really doesn't matter. You can argue the whole sprung versus unsprung weight. The shocks are light enough nowadays. I don't really think that's a big issue. But kind of, if you're running cockpit adjusters, I always mount them where it's easiest to route those cables as short as possible. If I had a preference, I would mount them body up, shaft down in a non-cockpit adjuster environment, just to keep the bodies away from the exhaust, with the exhaust blowing straight on them and heating the oil up. Let me scroll through here and answer some of these questions. Steve Cerniak, he has access to a dyno and a lot of pro shocks. That's a lot there to answer. So when Pro builds a shock, they have a specific curve they're trying to match, like at 1, 3, and 6 inches. They dyno up to 6 inches. If you ask them, they might give you what their tolerance is for each valving number. It's a pretty wide gap there. They have a pretty big tolerance. It's more of an economy level shock. So I can't speak on their behalf, although I did oversee the production of Pro shocks for a year or so when Speedway Motors owned CSI and they were in our building. They do build to a pretty wide tolerance, and they do have a number that they're shooting for each valving. So they could give you that information. I no longer have access to any of that, and they could give you that. But it's a combination of a whole curve that they're trying to hit, and that's how they get their valving numbers. Brent Smith, double adjustable non-canister. Yeah, when we built that shock, we were trying to get the most effective, quickest reacting shock in a clean package. It certainly works really, really well. As we're trying to broaden our adjustment capabilities and stuff, we're looking at other double adjustable designs as we're kind of reevaluating our product lineup and coming out with new stuff. But that shock does work really, really well. Most of our national midget customers run it on the right rear. A lot of our micro teams run it on the right rear just because it's a nice compact and it has a good range. Non-wing 600 basic starting pressures for Troy. Typically we would be 25 in the left front, 35 in the right front, depending on the track, 35 to 50 or so in the right rear, and 20 in the left rear for Troy. Kenny, yes, we would set the air pressure in the quarter midgets in the same fashion. Typically, a quarter midget shock is almost topped out when the car's on the stand and the axles are in the full droop position. So a lot of times you don't have to unhook them on a quarter midget if they're at full droop and pretty much topped out on the stand. But yeah, you need to have the shock fully extended when you check it. Second shift. Thoughts on increasing gas pressure to compensate for cavitation? Okay, so that's a good point. So we have to run a specific amount of gas pressure in the shock to avoid cavitation. And cavitation is a topic all in itself that we'll cover some night. When we give you our minimum pressures, that's to ensure the shock does not cavitate. And basically that cavitation is a pressure imbalance in the shock where the oil gets aerated and you end up with air bubbles. It's not as big of an issue now or with most of the current shocks because everybody's running a base valve, which allows you to run less pressure before cavitation. But Gonzo's right there as far as having to run a specific amount of pressure to avoid cavitation. Glenn, I'm assuming you're talking about a dirt midget gas pressure. So typically we just run a gas right rear on our midgets. We do have some sets that are all gas, and if we're running all gas with our shocks, now I will disclaimer this by saying when I give you the pressures, they're based on our shocks and what I know we need to have in order to avoid cavitation, and also based on the size of our gas chamber and what works best. So if this is a different brand of shock, the numbers I give you might not be ideal, so I just want to make that clear. But on our shocks, we would run 35 across the front, 40 in the right rear to start, and 20 in the left rear. Second shift, issue with running soft compression and stiff rebound. Do you want to elaborate on that question? Must still work on California time. I'm a early to bed, early to rise kind of guy, so these Monday morning quarterbacks late are difficult, but we were doing them in the morning, and it was nice to be able to get them done at the shop, but we got a lot of feedback from you guys, and everybody seemed to like the nighttime program the best, so it's keeping me from Monday Night Football, but I'm happy to help you guys and give you all the information I can. So certainly don't mind staying up a little later on Monday nights to get you all this information, and we appreciate you guys participating with questions. So any other questions from anybody tuned in for episode 31? Again, please always share this video with your friends, and helps us spread the word as we're trying to help all of our fellow racers feel confident when they're making adjustments on their cars. One other thing for the Monday morning quarterback audience, we try to always give you guys first crack on anything special we got going on. And so we've been starting to freshen up all of our test shocks from the season, and those are available on the closeout section of our website now. We'll be adding more as the week goes on, but if you're potentially looking for a used set of shocks, we've got a lot of those available now on our website if you just go to the closeout section. Don, we had several customers on the bump rubber kits there at Eldora. So certainly great track conditions for that, super slick, and the bump rubber system worked really well. There at Eldora, the track was like glass, so we would have been really low on gas pressures. It was super smooth. If you were going to run the top, we might have left a little bit more in the right rear because it was a little choppy on the small cushion it built up there on the wall. But for the most part, we were really low on rear gas pressures, down in the 15-20 pound range. Okay, so your question was that was soft compression, high rebounds when you experience cavitation. Okay. Football I speak of. So Steve, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a huge New Orleans Saints fan. Have been since I was a little kid. So definitely racing's my number one love, but I do like to watch football. Glenn. Okay, so you want to see an episode on specific adjustments for a dirt midget. We can certainly do that. I will add that to my list. All right, well, it looks like those are all the questions. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We hope you have a fantastic week. Again, if you're looking for used shocks, you can find those on our closeout section. If you don't see something you're after on there, you can shoot me a message, and I'll let you know if we kind of have those in the queue to get freshened up and added, and we'll get your name on them.